Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our weekly Thursday morning Parsha Shiur. This week we actually have a double Parsha. It's both Parshas Chukas and Balak. We're going to discuss one of the ideas, one of the stories that the Torah relates in Parshas Chukas, and we're going to see if we can apply some of its insights to our life to live as Torah Yidden today. If you'd like to follow along, we're in Perak Chof. I'm starting Pasuk Zayin. Again, this is in Parshas Chukas. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Leimer. The Pasuk says Hashem spoke to Moshe, and he gave him the following instruction. Quote, Kaches hamata, Hashem said, take the stick, v'hakel esoedo, and gather together the people. Ata v'Aaron achicha, you and Aaron your brother. V'dibartem el hasela, and you shall speak to the rock. Le'eineihem, in front of the people. V'nosan meimov, and the rock will give its water. V'hoitzeisa lohem mayim min hasela, and you will extract water for them from the rock. V'hishkiso esoedo v'esbeiram, and you will provide water for the community and for their animals. V'yikach Moshe samatem lifnei Hashem kasher tzivo. Moshe Rabbeinu takes the stick from in front of Hashem as he was commanded. Vayakilu Moshe of Aaron al kol pnei asol. Moshe and Aaron gathered together the people in front of the rock. Vayomer lohem, and Moshe says to them, Shimu no hamoyrim, listen, you bunch of rebels. Haminasela hazeh noitzi lochem moyim. From this rock we will extract for you water. Vayore Moshe es yodai. Moshe Rabbeinu raises his hand. Vayaches asela b'mateu pamoyim, and strikes the rock with his staff, with his stick, twice. Vayetzu mayim rabim, many waters came out. Vatesh to'edo v'iram, and the community drank, as did their animals. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe vel Aaron, and Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron, Yan lo hamantem bi, because you did not believe in me, lahaktisheni, to sanctify me, to make me holy, la'enei b'nei Yisrael, in the presence of the Jewish people. Lochein, therefore, lo saviu es hakol azeh, you will not bring this community. Ela oretz asher nasati lohem, Hashem says to Moshe and Aaron, because you did this, you will not take the Yidden into Eretz Yisrael, their promised land. As far as this discussion is concerned, we're going to start. There's another pasuk, but we're going to stop over here and let's just reflect for a minute. The story is very well known. If you stop any Yid in the street, who's done his basic Torah learning, and you say to them, well, why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu take the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael? Why was it destined upon him, and for that matter, Moshe and Aaron, why was it destined upon them not to go to Eretz Yisrael? After all, it's something that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted very passionately. Why were they not zoicha to make aliyah, to go to lead the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael? Probably the Torah learning Jew, even with a relatively basic amount of Torah learning, will reference this story and say it's all because of the story of the water and the rock. What's the story with the water and the rock? The most commonly known version of the story is Rashi's explanation here, which is that Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to speak to the rock instead of hitting the rock. But he didn't. He hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. And so because of that, Hashem said, right, now you and Aaron are not going into Eretz Yisrael. This is the story. This is what's written here. To tell you the truth, the commentaries have a very difficult time understanding this. First of all, let's say Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. Beseder, he didn't follow instructions exactly as he was told. But the bottom line is that he still provided the Jewish people with water, and it was still an incredible miracle. So why is this so terrible? So he was supposed to speak to the rock, and instead of speaking to the rock, he hit the rock. Hashem is supposed to be compassionate and forgiving of sins, so he hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. Why is that so terrible? Question number one. Question number two, if Hashem didn't want Moshe Rabbeinu to speak, to hit the rock, he wanted him to talk to the rock, So why did Hashem allow the miracle of the water to come out of the rock when Moshe Rabbeinu hit it? If this was an Aveira, a Nishtaman Aveira, such a terrible Aveira, then why does it work? Why does it actually succeed in getting the water to come out? Question number 3. If Hashem wanted to slap Moshe Rabbeinu on the wrist for being a bad boy, so to speak, and not doing what it is that he was supposed to do, no, so you give him a knas, you give him a fine, right? Have any of you been reading? They're going to make wearing masks now mandatory in public places, right? If you get caught walking around in public, I don't know if this is fake news or real news, I'm not sure yet, but I read last night, if you get caught walking around without a mask, you're going to get fined $250. $250. I mean, it's a significant amount of money, but they're not sending you to jail forever. You know, Moshe Rabbeinu, he was supposed to speak to the rock. Instead of speaking to the rock, he hit the rock. Okay. For that, you withhold from him the very thing that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted in life more than anything else, to go into Eretz Yisrael. Later on in the Torah, we'll learn he davened 515 times for it. The punishment doesn't seem to fit the crime. Another question the commentaries discuss here is the words the Pasuk uses. Hashem says to Moshe and Aaron, Yan lo hemantem bi, because you didn't believe in me, or because you didn't cause others to believe in me, lahaktisheni, to make me holy in the presence of the Jewish people. So what does this have to do with speaking to the rock instead of hitting the rock? It's as if the Torah is saying, had Moshe and Aaron spoken to the rock instead of hitting the rock, and then it would have given water, it would have been like this fantastic Kiddush Hashem, and all the Jewish people would have gone, wow, did you see that? But now that you hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock, now there's no Kiddush Hashem, or there's no Emunah being brought about in Hashem. And again, we're left scratching our heads here. Yan lo hemantem bi lahaktisheni. Moshe and Aaron did this because they didn't believe, because they didn't create some kind of Kiddush Hashem here. I mean, for God's sake, all that was done was that they spoke to it instead of hitting it. All right, other Rishonim explain that other Rishonim disagree with Rashi, and they explain actually that wasn't the issue. The issue wasn't that he hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. There's the very famous explanation of the Rambam that the sin of Moshe Rabbeinu was that he got angry. That he called the Jewish people. He had an endearment term for them, Hamoirim, right? Hamoirim here doesn't mean teachers. Hamoirim here means rebels, difficult ones. So some of the Rishonim learned that the sin was that they got angry, that Moshe got angry, and that's why he was punished. Again, a difficult explanation to understand because of all the above questions. First of all, if he did get angry, why is that so terrible? Second of all, because of that, you have to take away going from Moshe Rabbeinu the ability to go into Eretz Yisrael. And besides, if Moshe got angry and that was a sin, so why does it work? Bottom line, the water comes out. And what else? And why is this called a lack of Kiddush Hashem, etc.? Perhaps we can add something else that's difficult to understand here, which is, even granted, if Moshe had done something wrong here, however it is that you explain it, but what in heaven's name did Aaron do wrong? Why is Aaron getting punished? Hashem says to Moshe and Aaron, Yan lo hamantabi, because of this, therefore both of you are not taking the Eden into Eretz Yisrael. Aaron wasn't the one who hit the rock. Aaron definitely wasn't the one who called the Jews Moirim, who called the Jews rebels. So why is Aaron not going into Eretz Yisrael? And I guess really on a deeper level, the question here is, what really is going on? What is the Torah trying to tell us? A story, the Jewish people needed water. They came to Moshe. Hashem said, go get water from the rock. They got water from the rock, but they got it the wrong way. And Hashem put his foot down, and Hashem said, that's it. Moshe and Aaron are not going into Eretz Yisrael. The whole thing seems completely out of left field here. You know, some of the Rishonim point out, it's not the only place in the Torah where we find that Moshe gets angry. There's a few places it says that Moshe got angry. It's not the only place where we find that Hashem got, definitely not the only place where we find that Hashem got upset with Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not for today, but it's not even the only place that Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, you're not going into Eretz Yisrael. The first time Moshe Rabbeinu challenged Hashem, when the Yidden were still in Mitzrayim noch, when the Yidden were still in Mitzrayim, and Moshe said to Hashem, Lo Mar Yoisa, why are you dealing badly with this people? Hashem said, you're not going into Eretz Yisrael. But again, I guess the biggest question here is, the whole thing seems completely out of left field. Why are we all of it? In other words, one moment the story is sort of trotting along. We're talking about the Jews and we're talking about water and they need it and they're thirsty and the animals are thirsty. Take it out this way, take it out that way, talk to the rock, hit the rock, ahi, naher, amaisa, whatever. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe vel Aaron. If anybody seems guilty here, so to speak, kavayochel, if anybody here seems guilty of having a temper, it's Hashem more than Aaron. More than Moshe and Aaron, more than Moshe and Aaron combined. Because of this, right, that's it. Nobody's going into Eretz Yisrael. Who's talking about Eretz Yisrael? Who's talking about Eretz Yisrael? We're talking about water. If Hashem would have said, because of what you did, you have to drink last. Let all the Jewish people drink before you. Then you drink at the end. Okay, we would understand. A punishment in education, they always say, the punishment needs to fit the crime. Over here, the punishment, the consequence, seems out of left field. Because of this, you're not going into Eretz Yisrael. There's obviously a story beneath the story. There's obviously something else that's going on here that the Torah is alluding to or that we're missing as we read the Psukim, that we need to tap into a more pneumistic, a deeper explanation in what's going on. I want to add one more question. Then I want to move slowly into the explanation. Another question that the commentaries ask, which I think is a very, very strong question. Let's go back to Rashi's explanation. The sin here was that Moshe was supposed to speak to the rock, and instead of speaking to the rock, he hit the rock. Actually, by the way, Rashi says that he did speak to the rock, but he spoke to the wrong rock. I mean, this is almost comedic. He hit the wrong rock. So it was the wrong rock, and because of that, it didn't work. I mean, that's almost borderline comedic. But the question that the commentaries ask here is, if Hashem wanted Moshe to speak to the rock rather than hit the rock, then why does Hashem tell Moshe to take his stick? Go back to the beginning. Perek Chof Pasuk Zayin. Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe leim. Hashem spoke to Moshe, and he told him, quote, Kachas hamate, take your stick, gather together the people, and speak to the rock, and let it give water. So it almost seems like Hashem kind of set Moshe Rabbeinu up here. Because if he's just supposed to speak to the rock and not hit the rock, then why is Hashem telling him to take the stick? What do you need the stick for? What do you need the stick for if you're just going to talk to the rock? So what happened was Moshe Rabbeinu takes the stick, goes, starts talking. It doesn't work for whatever reason. So Moshe Rabbeinu thinks to himself, okay, so if I tried talking to the rock and it didn't work, why did Hashem tell me to take the stick? Probably to hit the rock. So he hit the rock and water came out. And Hashem says, oh boy, what you just did, gefährlich, terrible, disaster, chutzpah. You hit the rock. You're not going into Eretz Yisrael. Vakana ben Shoyal, why did Hashem tell him to take the stick in the first place? What was the purpose in taking the stick in order to speak to the rock? Okay. Of the many, many insights and many, many ideas that are given here, let's talk about this for this morning's Parsha Shiur. Hashem could have given the Jewish people water in many different ways. He could have made it rain. He could have made a river appear. He could have made a creek appear. There's so many different ways to get water. What's this business that the water has to come from a rock? All right, the truth of the matter is that the water has been coming from the rock throughout the entire duration of the Eden in the Midbar. It was called Be'er Shel Miriam, but Miriam had passed away and the water had dried up, so it was necessary to bring the water out again. Okay. But of all the different ways to get water, why a rock? Was hab's angehabt? Water from a rock. Why didn't Hashem just make it rain? Or why didn't Hashem just make a river? It's anyways a miracle. It's anyways a miraculous experience. So, make the water come from the ground or from the heavens or something like that. We never see this anywhere else. Water from a rock. So the commentaries explain that there is a message and a symbolism here. And here's how it goes. Here's what it is. Water represents life, vitality, energy. Water makes things grow. A rock is a symbol of something which is stubborn. A rock is a symbol of something which is heavy. And a rock is a symbol of something which is dead. When you say something is as stubborn or as heavy as a rock, what you mean to say is we can't move it, we can't budge it, it's completely dead. Something which is dead, you would say, is a rock. Or even when a person is insensitive, people will say he has a heart of stone. What does that mean? He has a heart of stone. What's a heart of stone? A heart of stone means he doesn't feel. His heart is dead. The Jewish people are in the Midbar. They've just come out of the desert. They need water. Hashem says, watch this. We're going to make the water come out of a rock. And for 40 years, that's what you're going to drink. For 40 years, you're going to drink water that comes from a rock. There was a message here. There was symbolism. There was a message for the Jews. You see, the Jews who had come out of Mitzrayim, they saw themselves as rocks. They saw themselves as cold, hardened, insensitive, and really dead inside people. They said, after all we've been through, after all we've suffered, after all we've gone through, we're hard on the inside. We're rock-like. We're survivors. After all we've been through, the most we can hope for is that the rest of our life, nobody will hurt us. But they struggled with themselves as being stone-hearted people because of their experience in Mitzrayim. Hashem said, I'm going to show you that from these stones, from these rocks, we can take water, we can take life, we can take vitality and energy, and that's what you're going to drink for 40 years. And they did. For 40 years, they drank water from a rock. It was called Be'er Shel Miriam. It was called Be'er Shel Miriam. It was extracted from the rock by Moshe Rabbeinu, who had actually hit the rock in Parsha Beshalach 40 years earlier when they needed water after Kriyas Yamsuf. Okay. Fast forward 40 years later, and it's time for the Eden to go into Eretz Yisrael. And now we need water. We need water from a rock. Hashem says to Moshe, I want you to go and talk to the rock. It will produce its water. Take the stick, Hashem says to Moshe, take the stick, go talk to the rock, let it produce its water, and the Jewish people will have water to drink. But Moshe Rabbeinu didn't. He hit the rock, and that's how the water came out. So what is the big deal? What is the big deal about this? The commentaries explain it this way. Here's a mashal, right? Here's an analogy. Imagine you need to change something in your life. Imagine you need to change a habit, to change a character trait. Imagine you need something within your own life needs to change. You want to work on yourself to be a better person in some particular way. You want to, I don't know, let's take a Parva example. You want to wake up earlier every morning. There's two ways to go about this within ourselves. There's two ways for me to get myself to change a habit and, let's say, wake up earlier every morning. One way is with willpower and with self-discipline. Willpower and self-discipline means I sit myself down one day and I tell myself, right, it's enough. I'm in control. I decide what time I wake up. I decide what time I go to sleep. It's time for me to exercise self-discipline. From now on, I'm going to do it like this and not like that. And I'm not going to let myself get away with it. And I'm not going to let myself give excuses. And I'm not going to let myself procrastinate. And I'm not going to let myself get away with any more shtick and any more garbage. Genug is genug. Ad kan. Done. And we tell ourselves that we're going to change a particular habit and we're going to do it differently from now on. And please God, with the right amount of willpower or with the right amount of self-discipline, we do. We bring about this change. But very often, if you're anything like me, very, very often, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't last. It doesn't last. Why not? Because in the beginning, we're very fired up. And in the beginning, we're very motivated. And we have a tremendous amount of willpower. But with time, the willpower starts to fade. With time, we start to lose our determination. And with time, we start to lose our drive. Call it the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara starts with the excuses and the justifications. And the bottom line is that whatever it is that I'm waking up for at 6 o'clock in the morning, it's also geschmack, it's also pleasant to sleep at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's difficult. And with time, the difficulty begins to wear away at our resolve, to chew away at our self-discipline. So what do most people do? They double down and they find more reservoirs of willpower and they push themselves harder and further and work and work and work to stay driven and to stay motivated and to stay pushed. But the bottom line is that it's always a battle and it's always a struggle. And I'm always fighting with myself in order to do this. And there's always resistance. So it goes back and forth and back and forth. And like 2 boxers in a boxing ring, I find myself slugging away and having this battle on an ongoing basis. That's one way. There's a different way. Not necessarily, the other way is not necessarily less complicated, but the other way is less of a battle. And the other way, in my example, where a person wants to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, for example, is where you find something to do at 6 o'clock in the morning that you actually enjoy. Something that you look forward to doing. When you finally do get yourself out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, you do something that you actually enjoy on a human level, like going for a walk. And then slowly, psychologically, you rewire yourself to begin with what's called association, where waking up in the morning is associated not with something that I hate doing, but it becomes associated with something that I enjoy doing, right? Psychologists like to call this rewarding yourself. You reward yourself for a good behavior, and then the behavior becomes associated with pleasure. The behavior, the changing of the habit, the waking up early in the morning becomes associated in my mind psychologically with something that I enjoy, not something that I hate. And then in order to then slowly, perhaps one step at a time, to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning becomes something that I look forward to. Yes, it's still easier to stay in bed. Yes, it's still going to require self-discipline, but it ceases to become an ongoing battle. I'm not fighting with myself every day at 6 o'clock to get up. Actually, sometimes I look forward to it. Actually, sometimes I get up with a bounce in my step. Sometimes it'll be difficult. Sometimes it'll be easier. But either way, when I do get up, it becomes an enjoyable and a pleasant experience. And so it's something that I learn to look forward to and develop an enjoyment and a geschmack. That's the mashal. The nimshal, my dear friends, is that there are 2 approaches when it comes to Yiddishkeit. There are 2 approaches when it comes to doing the will, fulfilling the will of Hashem in this world. One is an approach of discipline, of gavura, of hardcore, of black and white, line in the sand, do as you're told because you're told to do, and that's the end of it. Hashem gave us 613 mitzvahs, whether we like it or whether we don't, whether we're in the mood or whether we're not, whether we're interested or whether we're not interested, whether we understand or whether we don't understand. In Yiddish, anybody here speak Yiddish? Azoy, azoy. You know what it means, azoy, azoy? Azoy, azoy means this is the way it is. This is the way it's always going to stay. Our grandparents did it that way. Our great-grandparents did it this way. That's it. But I don't want to, but it's difficult, but I don't like it, but I'm not in the mood, but I don't understand. Fraska, patch, boom, boom. Nobody's interested in what you think. Nobody's interested in what you want. You do what you're told to do because you're told to do so, and that's the end of it. While this approach has value, while this approach is necessary, discipline, of course, is incredibly important. Incredibly important. To lead a productive life on any level, discipline is incredibly important. Doing what you're told to do, what you're supposed to do, what you have to do is incredibly important. There's a problem with it. The problem with it is that somewhere inside, the person remains hungry. The person remains, something about it is unfulfilling. And because of that, there's a never-ending struggle. There's a never-ending internal battle. And so it goes back and forth and back and forth. The other approach is, an additional approach is to teach a person, to teach a yid, to teach a child, I'll get to that in a few minutes, to teach a child not just that they have to fulfill all of Hashem's 613 mitzvahs and the thousands of laws that the rabbis enacted, but to teach the individual that Yiddishkeit, that being a Yid is geschmack, it's enjoyable. There's something about it which is beautiful and delicious. There's something about it which is pleasant. It's geschmack, it's beautiful. Now you don't have to fight with yourself every single day in order to do this. Yes, you need to stay self-disciplined, but there's also something about this which a person can enjoy. There's also something about this which a person can learn to love and experience in a positive way. That's a very different message. That way, it's less of a battle. And so there are these two different approaches. Now, which approach is correct? Obviously, both are correct. Which approach is necessary? At times, both are necessary. Which approach is more effective? It depends what the purpose is. If the purpose is to get the person just to follow instructions, then all you need is gvura, right? All you need is to draw the line in the sand. If you want to win the person over, then obviously you have to show them that they can enjoy it, that there's something about it that they can connect to. You have to win them over. If I shared this with you before, I'm sorry that I'm repeating it, but I think it's a very valuable point. Years ago, I read an article that stuck in my head. It was about a tennis coach. And the tennis coach was, his job was to coach the top tennis players in the world. The most, the highest, the best players in the world were coached by this person. And this person was very highly sought after, and all the people that he coached, they all outperformed, all of their expectations. And in this particular article, which I read, they sat down with him for an interview, and they say to him, you obviously have some gimmick. You obviously have some chokhmah, some trick. What is it about you? What is it about your method that the players under your tutelage, that you tutor, that you train, that you coach, do so well? Everybody wants to be under you. You must have something going on, so something up your sleeve, Would you be comfortable to tell us what it is? And would you be okay with other coaches emulating what you do? And he tells them like this, listen to this. He tells them it's no catch, it's no trick. I'm happy to share it with anybody and everybody can emulate what I do. What is it? He says, I'll tell you. He says, I train the players that I work with. These are the top seeded tennis players in the world. These are incredibly gifted and talented people. But like every human being on planet Earth, they have their areas of limitation and they have their areas of weakness. By the time they come to me, they know their areas of strength and they know their areas of weakness. And listen to this, he says. They're completely focused on their areas of weakness because they're absolutely convinced that the reason why they're not outperforming their rivals is because of their areas of weakness. Their areas of strength, they tell me, we don't got to do anything with that. Those are my areas of strength. That's where I shine. You know why I'm losing matches? You know why I'm losing games? Because of my weaknesses, because of my areas of weakness where I'm not effective. So they come to me, the tennis coach says, and they say to me, can you help us with our areas of weakness? And I say to them, says this coach, I'm going to train with you. I'm going to train with you for months and years. But we're going to spend 80% of the time working on your areas of strength, 20% of the time working on your areas of weakness. He says the players are very upset by this. Many of them want to leave me when I tell them this. Why in heaven's name should I train in those areas where I'm strong? In those areas I'm good. Let's train in the areas where I'm weak. Let's train in the areas where I'm losing. And I say to the players, I say to them, what a waste, what a pity. You spend hours a day training. You want to spend hours a day working on those areas where you're weak? They say, yes, of course. And I say the tennis coach to them, say, of course not. We'll spend 20, he says, I apply the 80-20 rule. We'll spend 20% of the time focused on your areas of weakness and 80% of the time developing your areas of strength. No, he says, I'll tell you what happens. The players train with me for a couple of months, and then they get onto the court and they face their opponents, and they destroy their opponents. Destroy them. Why? How? Because their areas of strength, which they've been developing, their talents, their God-given gifts that they've been blessed with by Hashem, they've been developing them for months. They've been spending 80% of their training time developing these talents. They take them from amazing talents to out of this world amazing talents. And of course, their opponents don't know what hit them. Yes, their opponents still try to take advantage of their areas of weakness, of course. Yes, their opponents will try to put the game in a place where their players are weak, of course. They do a little bit of work to improve at least slightly their areas of weakness, but only a minimal amount of work, just in order to be able to survive that. But they win the game, they're victorious through their area of strength. And then the coach added one more important point, which really stuck in my head. He said, besides, let me ask you a question. These players are on the court training for hours every day, hours. What do you think will happen to them psychologically if most of the time they're training in their area of weakness? So every time they miss, every time they get it wrong, every time they drop it, they feel bad about themselves. They're beating themselves up in their own heads. They're telling themselves, I'm not so good. Instead, he says, I get them to focus 80% of their time on their area of strength. So they feel awesome, and they feel incredible, and they feel strong, and they feel powerful because they are. And then when they get onto the court, they've had months of training, not just physical training, but mental training, where they believe in themselves and they feel strong and powerful. My friends, every one of us was blessed with a Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is put here within us by Hashem to make life interesting and to make life complicated. There are two approaches to the Yetzer Hara. One is a carrot and one is a stick. One is to beat the Yetzer Hara with a stick, and the other one is to talk to it. One is to play to the Yetzer Hara's area of weakness, and one is to play to the Yetzer Hara's areas of strength. It speaks to two approaches in general in Yiddishkeit. One approach in Yiddishkeit is to wake up every morning and to tell the Yetzer Hara, you're a piece of garbage. If I have bad habits, to tell myself, I am a piece of garbage. If I have inner struggles, to tell myself, I'm no good. And if I'm Jewish, and we as Jews do guilt like nobody and nothing and no one else, to wake up every morning and to say to myself, oh Shamnu, I feel guilty about this and I feel guilty about that. And to beat ourselves up in the name of everything holy and to do it over and over and over again. That's one approach. And then there's another approach. The other approach is to wake up every morning and to find something beautiful, to find our areas of strength, to find the areas in which we have God-given talents and abilities, and to develop and cultivate that, and to say, if the Eibishter put me here and gave me another day, there's a reason. There's something I'm meant to do and achieve. I am meant to be big, not be small. Yes, I need self-discipline, of course. Yes, I can't let myself run rogue and run around like a meshuggah, of course. I need to be self-disciplined. I need to always remember what it is that I need to do. I need to follow the Shulchan Aruch, of course. But within that, I need to find something that I enjoy, that speaks to me, that's beautiful, that I can build on, that will make me feel like a strong and a proud Yid. I want to tell you a word from Reb Moshe Feinstein. Reb Moshe Feinstein once said, he said there was an expression that Jews would say before the Second World War. In pre-war Europe, there was an expression that Jews had. It was a Yiddish expression. They would repeat it very often. You know what the expression was? They would say, quote, "Es ist schwer zu sein a Yid." Es ist schwer zu sein a Yid. You know what that means? That means it's difficult to be a Jew. People said it all the time. It was a thing. Here's how, I'll tell you, I won't just tell you what they say, I'll tell you how they said it. They would go like this. Listen, pay attention. They would go like this. They would go, "Oi, es ist schwer zu sein a Yid. Oi, es ist schwer zu sein." Oi, they would krecht, they would groan and moan, and they would say, "Oi, it's so difficult to be a Jew." Then the war happened, and many Jews came to the United States of America. And many of them still spoke Yiddish. And they still said, as they did in the old country, they still said, "Es ist schwer zu sein a Yid." Hat gesagt, Reb Moshe Feinstein said, Reb Moshe, this expression, "Es ist schwer zu sein a Yid," hat auch gekostet a Yiddische Dor. We lost, said Reb Moshe, a generation of Jews to this expression, quote, "It's difficult to be a Jew." We lost a generation of Jewish boys and girls over this. Why did we lose a generation of Jewish boys and girls to this? Because the young American boys and girls who grew up here heard their parents saying, "It's so difficult to be a Jew." And they said to themselves and to each other, "This is United States of America. We don't do anything difficult here. We only do the easy stuff. So if it's difficult to be a Jew, I'm going to try be something else." And off they went. We lost a Jewish generation to children who heard their parents echche and krechche and groan and moan and complain and say it's difficult to be a Jew. The parents, said Rav Moshe, didn't mean it that way. Of course not. The parents they never entertained the idea that there was any other option. Of course not. They were just expressing how they felt. It's difficult to be a Jew. Sometimes it is. Their children, the American boys and girls, heard their parents say this, and they were out the door. They were gone. They said, we're not sticking around for this peckle of a Shver Zayin Yid. Off they went. Instead, said Reb Moshe, we need to change the rhetoric and the narrative. You know what we need to tell our children? It says, Geschmack Zayin Yid. It's beautiful. It's delicious. Learning Torah is beautiful. Doing a mitzvah is beautiful. Davening is beautiful. Learn to enjoy it. Find some pleasure in it. That's an effective method of communication to American youth. Teach them that. And then you'll have a different story. Then you'll have a different message. And then you'll have success. It was his way of saying, in every generation, you need to communicate in a way which is effective to that generation. You need to talk the language of those people. Now, how do you think you convince children? How do you think you convince students that it's geschmack, that it's good, that it's tired, that it's precious and delicious to be a Jew? How? You know how? By enjoying it yourself. By being a living example. Our children need to see, not that we're Jews because we have no choice, not that we learn and daven because Nebuch we're stuck with 613 mitzvahs, but that we cherish it and that we love it. And then they grow up with a very different mindset. The first Rebbe of Chabad they called him the Alter Rebbe. Literally, that means the old Rebbe. He passed at the young age of 68. But in Chabad, he's still referred to as the Alter Rebbe. He was given the job to go around and have debates, public debates, on behalf of Hasidism. And so legend has it that he went to a particular city, which was not very famous for being warm and compassionate to Hasidim or Hasidism. And he held a public debate in some shul. Hundreds of people gathered around him, and they asked him all sorts of questions. And he did his best to defend and to explain and to justify and to articulate. He did his best to give answers to many of the questions that were posed to him about Hasidus. But I don't know if anybody here on today's Shiur has ever had the experience of dealing with Jews when they argue. Don't know if any of you have ever been in an argument yourself or seen other Jews argue. You should never know of such things. But let me just tell you, you'll take my word for it for this conversation. Let me just tell you that as a rule, it's not very effective. Right? You never have two Jews who have an argument with each other. And after a couple of hours, one Jew goes, you know something? I'm so happy we had this argument. You convinced me. I now see that you're right and I'm wrong. I'm so sorry. I'm so glad we had this argument. I learned so much from it. Have a nice day. That's not usually how these debates end. That's not usually how Jewish arguments end. Instead, when they end, each one is more convinced that he was right than before. And so after hours of debating and arguing, the Alter Rebbe had done his best, of course, to defend and to explain. But it's safe to say that I don't believe at that point anybody was convinced. As the Alter Rebbe was about to leave the shul, he gave a clap on the bimah. You know how you do right before you make an announcement. And he made an announcement. And his announcement was 5 words, a pasuk from Tehillim, and he translated it into Yiddish. He told the people who had gathered there in shul that day, quote, Ta'amu u're'u ki tov Hashem. Taste and see that Hashem is good. And then he walked out of the shul. And hundreds of people followed him. At that point, he convinced them. Because in those 5 words, he managed to convey a very important message. He said to them, my dear Jews, you're all religious. You're all Torah scholars. You're all holy. You're all incredibly devout Jews. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever had the experience of sensing or feeling that godliness is good? Is there something about Yiddishkeit that tastes delicious? Do you smell it? Do you feel it? Do you have simcha? Do you have happiness in Yiddishkeit? Or is it one long, miserable, painful experience? Do you wake up every morning with a bounce in your step, jumping out of your skin with joy and saying, I'm so excited, I have an opportunity to go daven to do a mitzvah? Is there something here that you appreciate and enjoy? Or is this just one huge to-do list that you have to get through every single day? Because you have no choice. Which one is it? Is there something here that you found that you love? Are you tasting the sweetness of Hashem and of Torah? Or is this one long process of inner struggle? You know, before Corona, people would walk around in the street on Shabbos. Very often, I'd see people walking around Frummer Yidden in the streets on Shabbos, and they just look positively miserable. And I wanted to walk up, of course, now that you want to walk over to them and give them a hug and a kiss. You can't do that now, you'll get sued. You want to walk over to them and give them a hug and say, Good Shabbos, why are you walking around like all the world's problems are resting on your shoulders? Being religious doesn't mean being miserable. You don't have to be depressed and farchmoret all the time. It's okay. Celebrate, enjoy. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. For some Jews, this is incredibly difficult. All right, stop for the next step. I'm trying to mute everybody. For some reason, it's not working. Oh, there we go. For some Jews, this is incredibly difficult. For some Jews, not. You know, they say when it comes to communication, when it comes to education, children notice more than anything what their parents are passionate about. The most powerful way to educate a child is not through speeches. The most powerful way to educate a student is not through fancy drushes. I give a lot of drushes. I used to, I should say. Give a lot of drushes. I don't know that people necessarily remember every drusha that they hear. But you know what students and children and people do remember? They do remember passion. When they see that their parents or that their teachers or that their educators or that their people, their religious leaders, when they see that they care, when they see that this is meaningful, when they see that this is something that brings them happiness and joy in life, when they see happiness in a teacher, in a rebbe, in a parent, when they see enjoyment in Yiddishkeit, this is incredibly powerful. And this is incredibly motivating. Let's go back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was given a message by Hashem. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Jewish people need water. Of course, the story here is not just that they need physical water. The story here is that the Jewish people need life. They need energy. They need chayas. They need something to live for. They need something to wake up in the morning with and for. They need drive. They need life. They're a generation of slaves who suffered for 210 years in Mitzrayim and wandered for 40 years in the desert. They are a people who have suffered, and they need water to come out of the rock of their own lives. They need life from it. Hashem says to Moshe, you're the leader. Go and take the water out of the rock in front of the Jewish people and show them how it's done. V'dibartem el hasela, talk to the rock, and it will give water. But Moshe Rabbeinu went and talked to the rock, and nothing happened. So he struck the rock twice, and water came out. And Hashem said, I'm so sorry, my dear Moshe Rabbeinu. You've used the approach of striking the rock rather than speaking to the rock. What you did worked. It was effective. But instead of speaking to the rock, you struck the rock. Hashem says to Moshe, you're not going into Eretz Yisrael. Here's the reason why. Yan loihem mantem bi lahaktisheni le'enei b'nei Yisrael. Hashem said to Moshe, you need to understand. The generation of Jews who are going to go into Eretz Yisrael, these are not the same Jews who were slaves in Mitzrayim. It's a different generation. They need a different form of education. What worked in Europe doesn't work in America. What worked in Mitzrayim doesn't work in Eretz Yisrael. What worked for the old generation doesn't necessarily work for the new generation. We need a different language. And unless you use the different language, you cannot take the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael. The generation of Jews who suffered in Mitzrayim, they respond to the stick. That's the language they understood. They were beaten with a stick in Mitzrayim, and so for them you take water out of the rock with a stick in the desert. But not the kids who are going into America, not the kids who are going into Eretz Yisrael, not the next generation. You want to talk to them? You got to talk a different language. You got to talk their language. You show them a stick. You beat them with a stick. They're out the door. They're going to look for a different school. Hashem said, Kaches hasela. You need to take the stick because children always need discipline. The stick needs to be there because children always need to know that there are lines they don't cross. But we no longer educate with a stick. Today we educate with words. You want to talk effectively to the Nefesh Habamis, to the Yetzer Hara? You cannot talk to its areas of weakness. You have to communicate to its areas of strength. Today's kids, Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, it doesn't work if you tell them how bad they are. You have to tell them how good they are. That's the difference between beating a rock and talking to a rock. I heard that a man once went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe to complain that his Hasidim were too pushy. He said, Rebbe, your Hasidim are too pushy. They're obnoxious. What do you mean? The Rebbe said. He said, I was walking down the street and some young pipsqueak Chabad Bocher, young man, walks over to me and verbally accosts me. First, he asks me if I'm Jewish. Right? So I tell him, mind your own business. Did I ask you if you're Jewish? Then he asks me if I put on tefillin. And then when I told him I didn't put on tefillin, he insisted that I put on tefillin right then and there. And I didn't have it within me to argue with him or whatever it was. So he ended up putting on tefillin with me. He said, Rebbe, but you've trained your boys to be aggressive. Why such aggression? What happened to free choice? He tells the Rebbe. What happened to free choice? The Rebbe said, I'll tell you. I'll answer you. He said, the world in which we live pushes its agenda, pushes its filth on us with force and aggression. Wherever we go, we're exposed to it, whether it's the billboards, whether it's before the internet, whether it's the newspapers that we read, whatever we pick up, whatever we expose to, take a walk in the streets in Los Angeles, the schmutz and the filth is being shoved in our face on a constant basis. He said, I taught my boys, they need to push Yiddishkeit into people's faces with as much aggression as the world pushes its nonsense onto people in order for you to have free choice. So that you can choose. Hashem came to Moshe Rabbeinu and he said to Moshe Rabbeinu, the way of the old country we need to change our model of education. We have to stop beating the rock and we have to start talking to the rock. Yes, the stick needs to always be there. Like those teachers that never actually use the stick, but you always know that it's there. The stick needs to be there, but the message has to be one of love. Like that tennis coach who found a way to get his students to see past their own areas of weakness and see into their own areas of strength. Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, the one who's going to take the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael is not going to be one who beats the rock. He's going to be one who speaks to them. In truth, of course, this was not only true of Moshe Rabbeinu. This was true of that whole generation. Moshe, his brother Aaron, and all that was associated with them. They were the rebbes. They were the teachers of the Jews who had come out of Mitzrayim. They were the ones who led them through that desert. They led them through their challenges. In the end, in truth, what Moshe Rabbeinu had done wasn't wrong. It was right for his generation. It was what worked. It was what Moshe, think about all the miracles that Moshe Rabbeinu did throughout his entire life. They were always done with his stick. Kriyas Yamsuf, everything was done with Moshe Rabbeinu. It was a generation that responded to the stick. And that generation died in the desert. And Moshe Rabbeinu, like a true leader, remained with them for all eternity. A new generation was to be born. Well, they were born already, but a new generation was to arise. They were going to be the ones who were going to go into Eretz Yisrael. And the method of communication was going to be very different with them. What's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is this. They like to say there's product and there's packaging. The product is always the same. The packaging is always reinvented. In every generation, we educate our children with the same Yiddishkeit of our grandparents and our great-grandparents. And for 3,500 years, it's the same Torah. It's the same mitzvahs. It's the same Eibashter. Everything is the same. And yet in every generation, we're challenged, we're called upon to find a way to communicate it to the next link in a way that speaks to them, in a way that talks to them, to their areas of strength. V'dibartem el hasela, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, find a way. Even when your student looks as stubborn and as blocked as a rock, v'dibartem el hasela, if you talk long enough, if you search deep enough, there is a way to communicate with a Jew who seems as spiritually dead and as spiritually insensitive as a rock. There's a way. You can find it if you search. And if you can't find it, then step aside because somebody else will. And that somebody else will be the one to teach the next generation the same Torah you taught yours. It's not a different Torah. Chas v'shalom. It's the same Torah, but it needs to be taught differently. Once upon a time, students were told, this is the way it is, and if you don't like it, you get patch. Nowadays, students still need to be taught discipline, but they also need to be taught that there is something about Yiddishkeit. Learning Torah is a gute Zach. It's good, it's sweet, it's beautiful. Children need to be taught to believe in themselves. Children need to be taught to find their own areas of strength and to develop them every single day. With our own Yetzer Hara, we can take two approaches. We can take the approach where we pound our own Yetzer Hara every day with a stick until we're bleeding. We can pound ourselves into submission. Perhaps we may even succeed. But we'll always remain with a battle. Or we can find a way to find a geschmack. We can speak to our own Yetzer Hara. We can find a way to win it over, to learn, to see something in itself that connects and that yearns and that finds beauty in it. And then it doesn't always have to be such a painful struggle every single time. May Hashem help us that we learn from both the lessons that the Torah is teaching us. Number one, the presence of the stick. Sometimes that message is lost on children. Sometimes a child does need to be told, you're going to do what I say because I said so, and that's the end of it, and you don't have a right to ask any questions. Sometimes the child needs to be taught that. That lesson has value in its own right, of course. And sometimes the child needs to be taught, sometimes the child needs a teacher where the teacher can communicate love and warmth to the child and teach the child to believe in themselves. You see, even if a rock has the ability to produce water and give water to drink to 3 million people and their livestock, it's still necessary for somebody to believe in this rock and show it how it's done. And teach the rock to tap into its own reservoirs of strength and of life. And then, and only then, is the rock ready to do what it was put in this world destined for, to give this beautiful water. Every one of us has within ourselves a rock. And every one of our rocks can give water and life to all of Klal Yisrael. Every one of us need to find a way to talk, to communicate, to reach, to peel through the layers of dirt in that rock and find the unlimited reservoirs of strength and of life-giving water and sustenance for all of Klal Yisrael. I wish you a wonderful Shabbos. I wish you all tremendous hatzlacha. May Hashem bless us all with tremendous hatzlacha in all our tremendous avodah, and may we find tremendous success in it.